Anyway, we're lighting up the place because we're talking about intelligence today, and it is, as I said, associated with light. And just as a quick reminder, we're in our Advent season. We're at the end of it. The wreath that you see represents the eternal presence, God, no beginning, no end, with the evergreen being evergreen, always green. The Christ candle is, the center white candle is the soul. It is the I am, our center of power. And we are saying that there are four spiritual resources that we call life, love, power, and today we're looking at intelligence. And all of these express through us in ways that are very familiar. Life expresses as enthusiasm, love as understanding, power as strength, and intelligence as order. And we'll focus on that aspect today. And then again, our graphic that kind of gives us a whole picture is these four elements, life, love, power, and intelligence, are the very essence of God, or divine mind, whatever you want to call it, creative life force, that is focusing as each one of us, as the soul of each one of us, the spiritual essence of each one of us, and that is filtering through our consciousness, our self-image, and expressing in a very unique way. And so when we talk about a Savior, we're talking about making an adjustment at this level, at the consciousness self-image level. We're not looking for someone to come down out of the clouds and change our lives forever, although that would be kind of nice if they would. But so far that has not happened. It's pretty much been the ball's pretty much been in every one of our courts. So that's how we approach this, that if our life is going to change for the better, for the more meaningful, for the more creative, or whatever, it must come through us. And we're saying that we have all the resources we need to allow this to happen. We may not be real attentive to those. So there is a practice of meditation which opens us up to this ground level of being, and I guess allows us to recognize what may be the blockages in our own self-image, our own consciousness level, the way we're expressing. The one thing I've been looking at this week, which I'm kind of surprised I am, because I was so turned off by the idea of intelligent design. Are you familiar with that concept? It is. It was presented to me. Actually, it was not presented to me. I stumbled upon it. The way I stumbled upon it on the internet was it was presented as creationism. That is, God created all the stuff in the beginning, as we find in Genesis, and that was done by, when God created human beings, for instance, they're done. They're there. No monkeys, no anything. The monkeys were created over in one stack and humans were created in another. But there's no change from that creation. Everything's created whole, and then that shifts into the great flood story where Noah puts animals, two of every kind, on the ark and saves all of them and starts a new life. So there are certain scientists, the Darwinists, that do not like anything other than that idea, that evolution occurred in a very slow process. So anyway, I actually discovered the meaning of intelligent design, and it is a completely different system of thinking than what I thought it was, because I just ejected it out of hand, when I first was exposed to it. And I think there have been court cases where they tried to teach it in schools and stuff, but more from a religious point of view. But the original idea was not religious at all. It was more centered on exactly what we talk about here. There is an underlying reality And for everything that we see, there is a pattern, there is a blueprint, an unseen blueprint. This actually goes back to Plato, and probably long before Plato, where behind all that we see is an idea. And that idea becomes the source of the intelligent design. There's something already developed at the unseen level, and that has a way of expressing. One of the problems that Darwin had was what's known as a Cambrian explosion, which happened 500 some million years ago, quite a while ago. And what that basically amounts to is life forms just exploded, that had no precedent. And nobody knows how to explain that. Darwin did not know how to explain it, and he said he didn't know how to explain it, basically. But anyway, the idea of evolution has been accepted and is taught in universities. It's the standard go-to theory, and it is a theory. So when I began to listen to or read some of the documentation on coming from a scientific point of view, I found out that I agreed with most of what was being said, or most of what was being written. And I think that's pretty interesting, that that's one way that established organizations, established science, put down anything new, is they'll relate it to something else and it becomes a straw man. And what they're putting down is not what's being actually taught. And if what I think it represents, what I think it was I would be for having that taught, because it's what I talk about all the time, that we are not, what we see in this material realm is an expression of what is not seen. And that's because, you see, Darwinism will take something like consciousness and just say it's a fluke. It happened by accident. There's no rhyme or reason to it. We don't know how it happened. But you look at quantum physics, and they say exactly the opposite. Consciousness is a fundamental of the universe, they believe. That it is, there's an intelligence underneath all of what we see. But the study of consciousness, I think David Chalmers coined the phrase, it's called the hard problem, because material science can't explain it. And so they say that you and I, our being is a fluke, it's an accident, it's a side effect of the evolutionary process. And I have never believed that was true. And yet scientists are saying this is science, this is truth. And so I never have accepted that. So I guess I don't accept truth. And what the truth is, they don't understand what they're talking about. They have a theory that they've been riding on for many, many years. And somebody else comes up with something that makes sense, or at least it fits the pattern, because the people that came up with this study the fossil record. And they say, how do you explain this explosion of life forms 500 million years ago? And there is no explanation for it. So they just kind of pass it over and go on teaching the thing and discredit anybody that comes up with anything that's an alternative to it. And that's been going on for a long time. But when we are told that this is the science, we have to question that. We have to ask, how much of that is really true? And even if we don't know how to think differently about it, we can at least explore new ideas, different presentations, and say, here's another way to look at it. Because the science is based on evidence, it's based on observation, and the intelligent design people are doing exactly that. They are basing their theory on the 4 pillars of science. And it's, but they come up with different conclusions. So the mainstream says your conclusion is wrong, ours is right, but we still can't explain everything. But when you look at intelligent design, it explains it better than Darwinism. It explains it better than the evolutionary. What I think it is, it's a combination of both things. But for me to stand up here and say, beneath one of the fundamentals of God, of the deeper reality out of which we all come, is intelligence. So I've been teaching intelligent design from day one of my ministry. I didn't know it. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't call it that. But I have always thought there is an intelligence under what we see, and I think probably most of you thought that too. But for science to take something like that and try to say, because what I think the writer of Genesis, when these people are saying, here's how it all began, that's all they're saying. We don't have to believe that. We don't have to believe the system that they're putting out there. But they say some things that are pretty good. And we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. The mystic taps into an intelligence that science does not know about. Science does not recognize or acknowledge. And it doesn't matter if that mystic lived 10,000 years ago. They're going to come out and say something similar to what any mystic today would say when they have a mystical experience, because they're tapping into something that doesn't change. And we're all trying to figure it out from an observational point of view, and you just can't do that. There is a level of knowledge that is accessible to us that does not come through our intellect. It comes through our intuitive faculty. And there have been many people that have acknowledged this, many very credible people. One of them is William James. He wrote a whole book about it. It's called The Varieties of Religious Experience. And I'm not sure I would recommend the book because it's a pretty hard read. But I really appreciate when people draw quotes of his out and put them out there for us to look at. And this is one of them. The mystical experience defies expression that no adequate report of its contents can be given in words. Its quality must be directly experienced. It cannot be imparted or transferred to others. Mystical states are more like states of feeling than states of intellect. No one can make clear to another who has never had a certain feeling in what the quality or worth of it consists. In other words, we can't pass on what we know is intuitively true. How did Jesus try to do that? We look at his teachings and we see that he taught by demonstration and he taught by parable. He was trying to find a language to explain something that can't be explained. What did he mean when he said the word Father? My Father, our Father. What did that mean? And our religious training mind goes back to this big old man in the sky with the beard and the white hair and all of that. And so if we would make any kind of a statement like that today, saying he was talking about a deeper reality, of course the scientists would say, he's talking about an old man in the sky. We don't believe that stuff. We debunked that a long time ago. Well, I did, and I know you did too, probably. When I hear or read Jesus referring to our Father, I don't think of an old man in the sky anymore. I don't think of a male at all. I think of a creative life force, a power that we don't see but is the source of our being. But how can you put that into words that an average person could understand? And I think that some of Jesus' greatest fans were average people who were not necessarily educated or trained in thinking along intellectual lines. There weren't all that many in his day. People were not educated, they were not literate. Overall, they say about 1% of the population in his day could read and write. And what would happen is those people would be put in positions, to serve the government or serve the synagogues or whatever. They would become scribes or get jobs copying old texts or whatever you do back then. But they were kind of a class of their own because they could read and write. So Jesus had to figure out how to talk to the average person, and he probably was one of them. He's depicted as being able to read and write. He gets up, I think in maybe Luke or Mark, I can't remember which one, but gets up in the very beginning of his ministry and picks up, it's the Gospel of Luke, picks up or opens up the scroll of Isaiah, I think, and quotes or reads from that scripture. So they say, well, he could read. Well, we know Luke could read. We don't know if Jesus could read. And Luke is portraying a Jesus kind of in the image and likeness of Luke. There's another time that he's writing something in the dirt, with a stick, and the people come up and say, this woman was caught in adultery, what do we do with her? And so his writing with the stick in the dirt is supposed to mean that he could write. Well, we don't know if he could read or write. Chances are very good that he couldn't. And that proves my point. It doesn't matter. He was not an intellectual. He was a mystic. He was a person who had a direct experience and was trying to say to the people around him, you could have this too. You can tap into this level of intelligence that I have tapped into, because it says they were amazed by him, this son of the carpenter, that he could speak with such authority. And the mystic speaks with authority because they've been there. They have experienced the landscape they're talking about. They've walked it. And the difficulty is trying to take that landscape and describe it to people who have never walked it, never been there. And so you have to do that in parable. You have to do it through story. You have to do it through healings. I think he was a healer. He understood how to tap into that power and stir it in other people to bring forth their healing. And we think, how could that be done? Study the life of Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, who was considered the grandfather of the New Thought movement, which we're a part of. Back in the 1800s, 1866, I think, is when he wrote some of his major works. He was the teacher of Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science. She denounced him totally later. But people thought in his day, because he was such a dramatic healer, that Jesus had returned. There were many people that believed this, and there were articles he lived in Maine, there were articles from that area suggesting that he might be the Messiah returned, because he took cases that were people on their deathbeds and was able to revive them. But the beauty of it is he explained how he did it. He realized that they were carrying an idea somehow that was not true, that they picked it up someplace along the line, and he accused the medical profession of putting a lot of this in people's minds. And he said that the two greatest culprits in society are the medical profession and religion. And that's kind of interesting, because a lot of them had religious beliefs. I'm going to hell, I've done something wrong, and I'm going to hell. He said he would have to argue with them like an attorney in a courtroom to get them off that idea, and then they would experience a healing. When he could get them to change their mind, they would experience a healing. When Jesus encountered the guy, the crippled by the pool of Bethesda, he said, do you want to be healed? The guy gave him all kinds of excuses as to why that could not be done. And that was the cause of his illness, was how he saw himself. And Jesus said, do you really want to be healed? Question probably the guy had never been asked, because everybody would look at him and say, well, he's an invalid. There's no way he's going to be healed. So we just throw him alms or we do whatever. But Jesus changed his psychology. And if you look at the stories, the healings attributed to Jesus, you'll find that in most cases, all but about 2 or 3, I think it is, he summarizes the incident by saying, your faith has made you whole. In other words, you changed your mind, you changed the way you see yourself. And that's really what this whole teaching is about. We are born into a culture that is very body-based and very brain-based. One of the biggest challenges I have with listening to lectures on YouTube and people that I really want to hear is their introductions. They last almost as long as the lecture because academia is saying, you got to listen to this person because they have all these credentials. They're smart. Quimby had very little education. Charles Fillmore, founder of Unity, had very little education. Jesus had no education. So what does that mean? They're tapping into a level of human experience that we can have, but we don't know it. And so we start with the idea that all that we see is supported by something bigger than all of us. And that something is living, it's life, it is love. It wants more than anything for greater good to be expressed through our lives, and that which is not so good to be dissolved. I was thinking about love operates like the immune system. It's constantly looking for things that could be harmful to the organism and constantly bringing things in that will help. That's the activity of love. It's the immune system. And we see that expressed in many ways throughout nature. So we have power. What makes the cells divide, what makes this whole system work without our controlling it? We don't know anything about how to do it, and yet it happens all the time. And then we move on into the level of intelligence. So I could believe in an intelligent design, that there's something behind everything we see that knows what it's doing. Can we define that? No, because it's beyond definition. It's like William James says, you can't put it into words. But that doesn't mean it's not real. You can't observe it, but that doesn't mean it's not real. But in truth, you can observe it, but you can't do it with the intellect. You can do it intuitively. We have the tools to observe reality, and that's our intuitive nature. And science will talk about intuition like Einstein was a real believer in intuition, and I have read comments from scientists today that say, well, it's not what you think it is. He meant something totally different. He didn't mean what he said when he talked about the value and validity of intuition, because Einstein said many times he would be working on a problem and then it would come to him in unexpected hours. The solution would come to him, so he attributed that to intuition. And I'm not necessarily talking about just that kind of intuition. When you enter meditation, anyone entering a meditative state is laying the intellect aside for a time, not discounting it because we need it, but laying it aside for a while, saying, stop making these decisions for just a few moments while I turn on something else here. I'm going to change the channel. And I'm going to open my intuitive portal. And I'm going to let it do what it does. And what it does, it opens to the infinite. And the intellect, as you know, keeps jumping in saying, can I help? Can I help? Can I help? Or what about this thing, or what about that thing? You know, our attention goes all over the place, which is why we struggle with it. But it doesn't matter how unsuccessful we are at tapping into it, we still have it, and it will never be taken away. That's the value of the near-death research. I think one of the greatest values is no matter how bad we screw it up, we'll never take it away. We'll never lose it. Whenever we manage to set aside the observing brain long enough, this light of intelligence will shine through us. And it's doing it now. It's doing it whether we're aware of it or not. And that's an important thought to carry. And you see, that's why we get into this whole idea of spiritual evolution. I'm not able to do that because I'm not evolved. It has nothing to do with evolution whatsoever. It has to do with where's your attention? What do you value most? You know, that's what we ask ourselves. If I set aside 30 minutes to be still and experience something deeper, and I start thinking about those 3 cats that I'm feeding, what am I placing the most value on at that moment? I place the most value on where my mind goes. What gets your attention, gets you. So in that moment, I'm valuing a thought about the cats more than I am the thought about God. And I'm not saying that in a way a derogatory kind of way, but that's really what's going on. I value whatever my mind races toward more than what I set down to do. And so it is an evolution of values, not an evolution of the soul. What do I value most? And what's interesting here, William James talks about this, is that you can't explain the mystical state until you have the experience. And when you have the experience, then your values change. When a person has a near-death experience, they're not the same. They don't come back the same. Their values have totally changed. But it's not from thinking about it. It's from experience. So that's the teacher. That's the Holy Spirit, the comforter, the advocate that teaches us all things. It's through actual experience. So we hold this thought that we are floating on top of this infinite ocean of life, love, power, and intelligence that we call God, or call it whatever. But we start with that idea that we're expressions of that we are constantly, we're one with that. We're in unity with it at all times. So we open our mind to the quickening presence of intelligence. Your entire being is already permeated with intelligence. The functions of your body are all governed by it. Just to think about, how does that work? Or you see a bird fly through the sky, you know, how does that work? What is governing that? And there's something that we don't understand, but we take it for granted. Our very aliveness, we often take for granted. We get into states of mind where living is a burden. Being alive is a burden, we think. And because we've got so many intellectual thoughts, so much baggage that we carry around, that becomes our life. It's sorting through our baggage. I got to get up today and sort through my baggage. And that's kind of our job each day. And we go into the day and we're sorting through all this stuff. We're not really having a now experience. We're experiencing the past. So that looks like reality to us, and we call it that. But Jesus, in his own mystical way, is trying to say there's something more to us. There's something deeper. You see and experience intelligence as order in your breathing, the beating of your heart, and all the many activities within the universe of your body, which you're not even aware. I just talked about that, so it's true. You see intelligence in the flower, in your pet, in the birds, and the clouds that sail across the sky. You know, how can we look at this planetary system that we live in, and then the universe beyond, and the universe is beyond that, and say there's not something going on here? Science says it is all random. It's natural selection. It's not. There's no intelligence behind it, in the sense of something bigger than you see. And I don't buy that. I never have bought it. I just don't always know how to put into words why I don't. But it is, I've said many times before, they're going to come up with something better than the Big Bang, I guarantee it. Hopefully in our lifetime. And they're chipping away at it pretty hard right now. But this intelligence is everywhere. It is omnipresent. When we are looking for guidance in our life, are we looking up to the sky, or are we looking within ourselves? Affirming intelligence is coming forth, and that's what we're going to do today. So, the very essence of my being is intelligence. My mind is clear. My thinking is orderly. I see things in their highest relation to the whole. Let's say these words together. The very essence of my being is intelligence. My mind is clear. My thinking is orderly. I see things in their highest relation to the whole. And I hope you don't just stop here this morning with these. Take your bulletin home and use these affirmations through the week. I mean, that's my suggestion. I'm not going to force you to do anything. My vision is clear. My soul is imbued with the wisdom of the universe. Together. My vision is clear. My soul is imbued with the wisdom of the universe. In all I do, I move forward in confidence and in peace. Together. In all I do, I move forward in confidence and in peace. And that is living by faith, living by understanding, living by through imagination, seeing, knowing. Every step I take is the right step. If your world's falling apart, give it a blessing in the sense that something greater is now unfolding. A greater good is now unfolding. There is an intelligence working in and through you, and in and through all of your experiences to bring that greater good forth. All right? Thank you for coming out. Hope to see you Friday night, candle lighting. The stars are brightly shining. It is the night of the dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till He appeared and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the tears of joy in grateful chorus raise we, let all within us praise His holy name. Christ is the Lord. Then ever praise we His power and glory evermore proclaim. Oh, night divine. Oh, night. Oh, night divine.
You've been watching a talk given by Reverend Doug Bottorff here at Independent Unity in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us spread our message. If you would like to support us, you can do so by clicking the button in the right-hand corner of the video screen. We greatly appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching.